Good afternoon and welcome to the annual presentation associated with the Crook Fellowship program. This is hands down my favorite part of the annual life of the Strauss Center. It's a part of the center's activities I wasn't familiar with when I first became involved with the center, but soon discovered that this is, I think, the most joyful thing that we do, and in many ways the most impactful thing we do. It's a big thing, and what's funny about it is, in a way, it began in a very small place. It really kind of begins at First Baptist Church in Nacogdoches in the 1950s, where you have a young man, a young preacher, who has got, as most preachers do, a strong commitment to public service, but it's more than that. It's public service beyond the boundaries that one parish can contain, and this young man at a certain point decides he wants to try his hand at politics. So in 1960, showing a lot of guts, William Crook decides to run for office against a 5-term incumbent. And as it tends to be in 1960 in Texas congressional races, that's kind of a no-win proposition. But it showed guts, it showed commitment, it showed real passion for public service. And William Crook was noticed by many people. Most significantly is noticed by the one and only Bill Moyers, and LBJ's advisor and aide, sees this young man with a fire for public service and ultimately taps him for important work based out of Austin, overseeing anti-poverty programs across a multi-state area. And the next thing you know, he's beyond Austin. He's left Texas, he's in DC, and he's running VISTA, which becomes AmeriCorps. And beyond that, you can't contain him in America. Apparently, next thing you know, he's the ambassador to Australia. Of course, his time in government service ends, and all these energies continue to flow forth. We're talking orphanages in Ethiopia, the support for Bread for the World, a lot of it, indeed, all of it done in partnership with his wonderful wife, who's right here in the front row, Eleanor Crook, who matched him pound for pound with talent and passion. And what you see in the two of them, passion for public service, willingness to step out of a comfort zone and get one's hands dirty to actually come to grips with the problems of the world, doing it on a global scale, fighting poverty, fighting hunger. All these values come together and are represented in one of the many neat aspects of William Crook's legacy. Ambassador Crook's legacy is I think, so perfectly captured by the incredibly generous gift that Eleanor Crook gave to the LBJ School and to the Strauss Center in creating the chair named in her husband's memory that makes possible these fellowships that you're about to hear about. It's something I learned last year. You think from reading on paper, you have an idea of what someone does when they go abroad or to Washington to work in one of these programs. But to actually hear them come back and present live and show pictures of where they've been, but to talk about how it changed them personally, it's really far different and far more impactful. So I'm so glad you're all here today to have that same experience. The way this will work is we're going to hear one by one from the fellows, starting with John. And then when we conclude, all the fellows will, as I understand, come out. We'll set up a table here so they can, as a group, field questions that you may have. We'll finish by 1:30. But without further ado, you're really not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from John and his colleagues. So let me turn it over at this point. Thanks, John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Dinning. It's really a pleasure to be here with y'all to tell you a little bit about my experience this summer. I was an intern with Save the Children. I worked in their El Salvador country office with their monitoring and evaluation department. I worked on 2 major projects. The first one, I helped with training for their evaluation of an early childhood literacy program. For this evaluation, they used Android tablets and collected data directly on the tablets. This was really interesting in the sense that as soon as they got back to the headquarters office, all the tablets were up, the information was digitally uploaded through the web. So in terms of evaluation, this reduced one step where errors could be introduced to the data because there was no person hand entering the information onto the computer. It was also interesting from an evaluation perspective because you could analyze the results the day that they were gathered. So you didn't have to wait for several weeks to see how were people responding to the surveys, and the surveys could be modified right after day 1. So that was really interesting to work on. But most of my time was spent with an evaluation of the essential package the essential package is a suite of early childhood care and development activities and trainings that were developed by CARE, Child Fund, the Consultative Group for Early Childhood Care and Development, and Save the Children. It was originally developed for Africa, and it's being piloted in El Salvador and India, and this was the evaluation of that program. So the evaluation had three components. The first was the ages and stages questionnaire. This is a sort of standard early childhood development instrument that's been used around the world very extensively here in the United States. It's originally from the United States, and it evaluates childhood development on 5 key areas. In this picture, he's evaluating, this is Raul, who's evaluating a young girl on her gross motor skills, seeing if she can catch a ball with 2 hands. It's one part of the evaluation. The other was a caregiver survey, and this was a survey for mothers or grandparents, whoever was the principal caregiver for the young child. And this was developed with input from the Ministry of Education. Advocacy is a big part of the work of Save the Children, working with government agencies. So including them in the development of the surveys was part of the work that I did this summer meeting with them, and we included some questions that were of specific interest to the Ministry of Education. And the last part of the evaluation was anthropometric measurements. This is height, weight. These are taken by nutritionists hired by Save the Children. But again, to use this information in the advocacy work with the Ministry of Health, we had the Ministry of Health give all of the nutritionists a special training to make sure that their methodology for gathering data in the field was harmonized with the methodology of the Ministry of Health. So all the data collection was done with an eye toward use in advocacy with the government agencies in El Salvador afterwards. And this slide, this is some of the data from the anthropometric measurements. This was calculated using the World Health Organization Anthro software package. These were just our first 228 observations. The green curve is the World Health Organization standard for, this is height for weight, or height for age, which is sort of the measurement for stunting. And you can see that of the first observations we gathered, the red line, they're significantly lower height for age than the international standard. I'd just like to conclude briefly discussing an observation I had doing this. A lot of the work we did was preparing for site visits and working with community leaders to get mothers and their children to come to these evaluations. And one of them said to me, she said, you know, sometimes we ask the mothers to come, bring their kids, or we're going to have an evaluation. The mother says to me, well, they're going to ask me a bunch of questions. I'm going to spend a lot of time, and then they leave, and I might not hear back from them. And the truth is, the way this evaluation was developed, there was no plan of returning the information to the mothers on an individual basis. If information came back to the communities, it was really in a global summary of what was found maybe in the district of the department. So I spent a lot of time thinking of that, because being able to put reports on an individual level, if you're gathering 800 observations, which was what this survey did, it's very difficult. But I spent some time toward the end of the internship working on a way to get the ages and stages questionnaire information, which was the evaluation of early childhood development on 5 categories: communication, gross motor skills, fine motor skills, problem resolution, and social, individual, like emotional development. Find a way to make all those reports automatically, so it was really easy for Save the Children to use that information as part of their program activities. The data collection we do has a lot of value for a program evaluation, but it also has a lot of value for the programmatic aspect of the actual early childhood care development trainings in the field. So with this, what we were able to do is use our big Excel spreadsheet with all the information, and this is sort of code that is in Microsoft Word, and with that, you can generate hundreds of reports individually for every single mother who participated. In this field for communication, using this code here, we had 9 different options, categories based on high, medium, low results, different age categories, so we get a little paragraph about what the results mean, and different strategies that mothers could use to address it if based on the result they have. So we have all these reports that were generated by department, municipality, village, neighborhood to really facilitate the Save the Children technical workers in the field of using this information that we gathered for program evaluation as part of a point of departure for a discussion of early childhood care and development, really individualized for the mother. So that was the very last project I did for my internship. I would like to thank the Strauss Center and the Fellowship Committee for all their support during this time, and most especially to Mrs. Crook for making this possible. Thank you all very much.
Hello, my name is Annie Dupree. I wanted to start out by saying thank you. This summer was amazing. You'll see I had some really great experiences, and it would not have been possible without the support of the Strauss Center and Mrs. Crook and this great fellowship. My name is Annie Dupree. I had 2 different internships this summer. I worked with the Economic Policy Research Institute and the UN Association of South Africa. I was based in Cape Town, which is an absolutely beautiful city. It ranks as one of the top destinations in the world, and yet South Africa still has many development issues. What you don't see in this image is just surrounding the city, there are just miles of townships and slums. So I'm going to go through my 2 different internships and the projects that I had with each of these. The first internship that I had was with the Economic Policy Research Institute, which is located right outside of Cape Town. And as the name suggests, they do work on socioeconomic policy, providing guidance to governments and organizations. The first project that I worked on was called the Microinsurance for Orphans and Vulnerable Children project. I didn't take this picture, but one of my colleagues did, and I just think those kids are so cute. So my role in this project, it was the very beginning of a research report to analyze the current situation of microinsurance in sub-Saharan Africa for children who are vulnerable or have become orphans due to HIV/AIDS. And there are a couple of terms in here that are difficult to define. So it was a very interesting process in the beginning for me as we went through just determining what microinsurance actually means, because that was one of the requirements that we had in our research. Microinsurance is also a very new idea and a market that really hasn't taken off the ground yet, so it's limited. And then orphans and vulnerable children has multiple definitions based on who you ask. Sometimes a child is considered an orphan if they have lost one parent to HIV/AIDS or both parents, or even if they're just at risk of losing a parent. So then how do you measure who's at risk? So there was a lot of really interesting, complicated questions to ask during this process. I was involved in determining the demand for microinsurance of this population. So it was really quite a learning experience dealing with some interesting topics that are very complicated. That project's still going on, by the way. And then my second assignment was maternity benefits for women in Ghana. So EPRI, though it's based in South Africa, works with governments and organizations throughout the world, basically based on demand of who needs something done by a think tank like them. So maternity benefits for women in Ghana, this project, they were asking us to, this organization, Aspires, was asking us to analyze the possibility of creating a maternity benefits package for women in Ghana. Now, 86% of women in Ghana report self-employment. So you can't go through traditional methods of asking a business to provide these benefits. So basically, I was helping them to create the ideal package of maternity benefits for women in this position, and then also working on coming up with ideas as to how those could be delivered. And this was a guidance, a policy advice document that we were creating for this organization, which they would then roll out in cooperation with the Ghanaian government. Again, this is a project that's still going on. So both of these projects were multi-year projects, lots of detailed information and research going on, but this was one of the discussions that I went to in South Africa on that topic. And then the third project that I had was with the UN Association of South Africa. There are many UN associations throughout the world. The one in South Africa has offices all over South Africa, and I was located at the Cape Town office. Right now, their main project is freedom from violence. What they're trying to do is to advocate for peace and security to become a pillar of the UN Sustainable Development Goals once the Millennium Development Goals end in 2015. So they're trying to galvanize interest on this issue, basically basically asking people to help them understand how violence influences development. most of the countries who won't be meeting the Millennium Development Goals are countries where violence is rampant. There's definitely a correlation that we've seen there. So my role was conducting interviews in the community, and I also created a community survey, which is actually right now being rolled out in some of the townships around Cape Town. We have a couple of trained volunteers who are going door to door and asking people how violence affects them in their daily lives. And we're going to use that to map out pockets of violence in the communities there. And so I'm actually still working with them remotely, which has been great. So I was able to make some amazing connections with both of these organizations and keep in touch on these projects that are still ongoing. So this was one of the events that I was able to attend. I'm hiding in the corner here. So basically I had so many great opportunities while I was there to really branch out of not just the amazing work I was doing with the organizations, but some opportunities that they connected me to. This was a conference on alternative peace resolution and peace studies in Africa, the 4th annual one. So I was able to go and network and meet people from all different kinds of backgrounds, with all different sources of experience in transitional justice, working on violence and development. And through these networking opportunities, I am now going back in December and I have some interviews set up, so that turned out great. So yeah, I got to do some really great work, and of course, South Africa is beautiful.
Wonderful.
So, hello, my name is Jessica, and I am not a Crook Fellow, but our next fellow is Rachel Markowitz, and she's spending the semester in Israel, so she's put together a little video, and I'm going to play it for you now.
Hello everybody in Austin. I'm coming to you from Rabat, Morocco, where I'm waiting for a fall semester to start in Tel Aviv, Israel. So I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But here's my presentation about my summer as a Crook Fellow in Kigali, Rwanda, where I worked with Search for Common Ground on projects related to the Great Lakes region of Africa. I hope it answers all your questions, and if not, I have my email address listed at the end so that you can feel free to contact me personally. So just a quick overview. In the next few minutes, I will tell you a bit more about Search for Common Ground and their mission, as well as my own mission for this internship, some of the main projects that I did while working for them, and then a little about some of the extra benefits that I found from this experience that weren't necessarily directly related to my work. Then I will review some of the insights I gained and talk about what to do moving forward. Search for Common Ground is a very large international NGO that works in the field of conflict transformation. What this means is that they see conflict as an opportunity rather than something automatically negative. And they work with governments, communities, and individuals to learn how to approach conflict in a non-adversarial way without violence. Search for Common Ground works in 34 countries around the world. For me, I was based in Rwanda, but working on regional projects. So my projects focused on Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Tanzania, and South Sudan. And I also got to work on some Africa-wide projects. For me personally, this summer I was looking for an internship where I could expand my understanding of conflict resolution. It's a topic I've studied for years, but isn't necessarily my main focus at the LBJ School. So I wanted to make that my main focus. I had interned previously with Search for Common Ground in Morocco, where I lived for several years before starting graduate school. And I wanted to find a project where there might be some potential to learn about how sports can be used in the development world. I also wanted to move my focus from the Middle East and North Africa into Sub-Saharan Africa, as the two regions are very closely intertwined. I felt I needed to gain some expertise in Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in Francophone countries. Probably first and foremost, though, I needed an internship where I could learn about project management, particularly managing projects that are related to conflict studies or to sports and development. And I really wanted to work for an organization that focused primarily on local staff as opposed to hiring mainly expats, as many international NGOs do. I got to work on a very wide range of topics with Search for Common Ground, including technology for good governance, working with people in mining areas throughout the region, working with petty traders, youth entrepreneurs, people in the media, training journalists, mediators, and some more general capacity building projects for Search for Common Ground staff. My tasks mainly included writing, so report writing, writing for grant proposals, and especially advocacy pieces like blogs and success stories, and then providing some general support to the regional director and to the Rwanda country director. I was also really privileged to be there at a time when they were conducting a 3-day innovation forum. The vice president of Search for Common Ground came, and I helped her put together a number of activities for staff to work on coming up with game-changing ideas in the field of peace building. And then I got to facilitate a 1-day training on the same topic just for Rwanda staff. And then last but not least, a project I worked on a lot was using the sport of ultimate frisbee for a community building project with petty traders between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Outside of the actual task that I performed at my internship, I also learned a great deal of things that relate to my studies of global policy, of development, and conflict resolution. Specifically, I learned a lot about the genocide that occurred in Rwanda in 1994, the events leading up to that, and then how the country has recovered from such a long and important conflict. I learned a lot about ecotourism, about poverty, sustainable development. I got to travel the country and meet subsistence farmers and women at women's cooperatives, and really see firsthand, for instance, how a waterfall can be used to generate electricity for a tiny village in the middle of the rainforest. I also learned a lot about the NGO world in general. I've worked in this field before, but this experience gave me new connections and showed me what my role after this master's degree could be in the field of development. All of the projects I worked on for Search for Common Ground were pieces of ongoing projects, so I didn't do anything start to finish. So moving forward, everything I worked on for them is still in process. If I wrote an annual report, that annual report will be repeated next year based on the report I wrote this year. The community building that I did with the petty traders was one activity in a series of activities that are taking place with them. For me personally, moving forward, I think my main insights, what I really learned is that I do want to work in the field of conflict resolution, that project management is something that I am well suited for, and now I have a number of new skills that make me capable of assuming that role. I do want to continue focusing on the Middle East and North Africa, but the Great Lakes region is now somewhere where I have the potential to work. And probably most importantly for me is that I learned that using sports for peace and development is not only something I love, but it's something really feasible and really growing in acceptance in the development communities. So that's it. Thank you all very much, or as they say in Kinyarwanda, Murakoze Chane. Thank you for listening and for all of your support, especially to the Strauss Center and to Mrs. Crook for making this summer happen. It's been a really formative experience for me. My email address is listed underneath the cute picture of the giraffes from the safari I went on in eastern Rwanda this summer. Feel free to contact me with any questions or comments or advice moving forward. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, I am Meredith Malsby. I was interning in Ethiopia this summer for USAID. USAID interns, they are either placed within the embassy with USAID or with implementing partners. I was with a partner. I was with FHI 360, who's based here in the US. So within FHI 360, I was with a project called Progress. It was started when the Ethiopian Federal Ministry of Health partnered with USAID to do an expansion, just an overall health expansion, and specifically for us, expansion of long-term birth control, such as the IUDs or the implant that goes in your arm. So specifically for Progress, where they come in is they come in to do monitoring evaluation for the Federal Ministry of Health, as well as teach them how to do it on their own. So while other partners are doing training on the IUDs and the implants for the health extension workers, Progress goes into the health centers, and their main two activities are they evaluate the training that's occurring, and they also do trainings for the Ministry of Health staff as well as the health center staff on how to do their own evaluations. So, and here's a picture of a health center that I went to in rural Ethiopia. So my internship specifically, I created a quality control checklist. So it was going to be used by FHI 360 staff as well as the Ministry of Health staff to, while they go into the health centers, they're looking at the trainings, but they also can use this checklist to check for the right equipment at the health center, to check infrastructure. They also, we specified lots of questions to check that the employees are treating the women mostly coming into the health centers with respect, giving them the information that they need, and doing it correctly. I also helped draft a quarterly report that FHI assists in to USAID about all that they've done this last quarter. Mostly right now, they are working on expanding the areas that they go to and the number of health centers that they go to. That's what that report mainly focused on. I also updated their training manual and PowerPoint that they use when they go to the health centers. We specifically added parts on how to use computers and Excel, because the FHI 360 is now giving computers to the health centers so they can use a more efficient way of updating their systems and all the information that they have that they bring in. And we also added rules for USAID on how they can and can't use their money, mostly on abortion rules, because USAID won't let you use money for that. And then, so unfortunately, a larger part of my internship with Progress Project was going to be traveling to health centers and do my own evaluations that the program officers do. Unfortunately, there was kind of an issue with the government, which I'll go into in a minute, and all of our travel had to stop. So fortunately, I was able to go with a fellow USAID intern who was focusing her project on emergency labor training also in the same health centers. So I was able to go with her, and we looked at the BMOC training, which a lot of partners are doing, like Pathfinder and John Snow Inc. And so she had created a survey tool, and so we went to check it and see if it was asking the right questions, if it was getting the right information. It was focusing on asking questions of people who had been trained in BMOC to see if it was consistent throughout the different partnerships, and also a checklist of the health center to see if they were up to date on infrastructure, if they had electricity, if they had running water. So that was the best part of the internship, obviously, because I got to go out, get away from the capital, and go and visit all the people in the health centers in rural Africa. And they were really different. And here's a great poster I saw. I asked what it was said, and I kind of forgot. I think it says that the husband and the wife are very happy that they've received really good health care at the health centers. Okay, and so what I learned, which I thought would be important for other students looking into it. Okay, so this goes into the little snafu we had, and that there was turnover within employees within the Ministry of Health as well as our organization. And because of that, there was kind of a loss of kind of miscommunications, and people didn't know about our project past the bosses of the person who left at the Ministry of Health didn't know about our project, or we think maybe they associate it with the man who left our program, who left our organization. So they were still working that out when I left. I actually don't know if they've worked it out. It was really unfortunate because all travel stopped. All the program officers were supposed to be gone. This happened about halfway through, so in about July. So hopefully they got it figured out, because they had to pause everything, so it was really unfortunate for them. So it does not always go smoothly, so you definitely need to be prepared for, hiccups. So hopefully they got it figured out. USAID was working on it. And then also I think this is really interesting, and I didn't really think about it until I got there, the difference between USAID and the partners. I obviously was with a partner, so with partners you get more on-the-ground experience. Even though the people at USAID were in Ethiopia, they were more in the embassy, and the embassy does much more overseeing. So there's definitely a difference in what you're able to do, what you get to go do, and I think that was really interesting. And from my experience, I think I would prefer a partner, just because I feel like you just are interacting more with your project. While at USAID, you oversee many more. So I think it's just personal preference. I really liked partners, but everybody at USAID Ethiopia was fantastic, and they were so great and nice, and I learned a lot from them too. So I think that's really important for people to think about if they're trying to go into international development, of what USAID does, not only in DC, but also in the country. So yeah, there are some pictures. Oh, thank you, Mr. for allowing me to. Thank you.
So good afternoon. I'd like to thank Mrs. Crook and the Strauss Center for making this opportunity possible, and also for the support for the Baines Report. I had some internet connection issues for my blogging for the summer, so thank you for everybody who made it possible. So my name is Ben Morrow, and I worked with Human Manure Power, and we were in Sukpur village in Bihar, India, so that's northeast India, and where we are is about 60 miles south of Nepal. I want to start off with a picture of our grand opening of the toilet block and also the community, because the community is absolutely the most important part of what we do, and without them it wouldn't be possible. And this was all the children, all the women, all the men of the community coming out and kind of supporting the intervention as well. So HUNR is a funny name, so maybe it'd be good to talk about what we actually do. So the mission is sustainably end outdoor defecation in India. And how we do this is we work and we fight alongside communities we fight for health equity and social and economic justice. And it's important to actually work with these communities, and because they're the ones who are going through it. And if you don't know, in India there's over 650 million people who defecate outside currently, so that's 100,000 tons of human waste entering streets, entering waterways, entering people's lives every single day. And then on top of that, 40% of young women in India, they cite that the fact they don't have a toilet at school as a reason for dropping out of school. So it also becomes a women's issue, a health education issue, and a security issue. So these are kind of the missions that we strive for, and how we actually do it is we have a community toilet block, which then feeds into the biogas digester, which then powers a generator, which then the generator powers a water filtration system. Water filtration system powers clean water, and which is sold to the community below market price, and then that feeds back into paying for staff, paying for maintenance, and allowing the whole process to continue. So my actual activities while I was with HUNR this summer started out with construction. So there's a lot of project management, a lot of making sure that we were meeting deadlines, and making sure the facility was actually going to make it for the opening ceremony, which we did. But then at the same time, we were also meeting with government officials. So we met with some local government officials. One of them, he's the leader of the 5 villages in our area that are called panchayats, and he is in support of our organization, and he is in support of actually helping to find money for the community and helping to find money for more facilities. So we have local support. We also met with a technical assistance group in the capital in Patna, and they work with the Public Health Engineering Department. So they're a national level organization that works on sanitation issues. So now we're working towards becoming a development partner with the Public Health Engineering Department to actually bring a voice for these poor rural people into the sanitation discussion for India as a whole. So it was a lot of great work, but at the same time, we also hired a health education worker. And so that we have daily classes now, which are teaching children the benefits of sanitation, the benefits of washing their hands, and how this actual facility will help them. And then kind of one of the more important parts was a women's group. And we had a team come in from the US, a couple of architects who were looking at building a safe space for women, but also they instituted a women's group. And what they do is they meet weekly, and they talk about their health, they talk about the community, they talk with one another, and it's a form of empowerment. There was a little bit of a backlash, but that's to be, I guess it's to be expected. It's a Muslim rural community in India, so there was some backlash from the men, but because we work so closely with the community, we were able to work out those kinks and actually get this off and running, and it's still going, and they're still meeting every week. So when all of that is done, we have what I think is a beautiful toilet block. Very not normal to say, but it's a multi-service intervention, and it's really, makes these people the protagonists of their own lives and makes them be able to make decisions for their own health. And so the actual impact. We have now over 600 users every single day at the facility. To actually function, we would need around 500, so we're meeting that mark. A community of over 3,000 people has sanitation access now. Children are learning about the health impacts, and the women in the community are actually able to meet and talk and have a safe space for their own. So it's about making them the protagonists of their own life and their own health, and they very much are, and they're very vocal about that. And that's what's great about working in this community. So in this picture, there's a string of lights, and over here, there's another village, and no one was coming from that village to the facility at night. So we were wondering why. And someone said, you need to have lights. You need to put up lights so that it's a safe walkway for people to actually come. So we did, and the next day we had 100 people from that village, and that number's growing. And then you don't see, but coming this way, there's another path that was also dark. So I said, we need another step for over here. So we put that in, and the numbers keep on growing. So the great thing about working with these communities and having this trust and this development with them is they can say, these are the things we need, these are what we need to happen, and we can actually do them. So in terms of future work, this is our team. So these are all the people who work in the US, but mainly in India on the site. So we have future sites planned. We have, we're fundraising, and we're looking at capacity building. But I was actually just in New York this past week. We were up for the Global Citizen Award, and we won, so that's $100,000. So that's a big step in the right direction for the future work, and for building these new facilities and bringing on new staff. So thank you very much.
My name is Peter Morrison, and I was in Senegal this summer with Peace Corps Senegal. I want to thank the Strauss Center and Mrs. Crook for this opportunity. It truly was a really great opportunity, and I had a great experience there. I'll tell you, each slide has a photo too, so I'll just tell you a little bit about the photos as I go through. This is just a coastal town, kind of a common small village on the coast. So Peace Corps Senegal is a trailblazing office for Peace Corps globally. They have 50 staff, mostly local, and 250 Peace Corps volunteers throughout Senegal. They do projects, development projects in health, community economic development, and agroforestry and agriculture. My role coming into the organization was first going to be, when I was planning it, was actually going to be to analyze data and help them produce annual reports because they were all excited to have their first year of good data after their new project, after they designed their new project indicators and framework. About a month before I got there, they actually saw the data and said, oh no, we don't have good data, will you please help us figure out why? So my role changed, and I became monitoring and evaluation intern, and my goal was to evaluate why Peace Corps Senegal was getting poor data from the field, and then try to make recommendations for them to improve that process. Oh, this photo. So this was out in the field. I'll tell you in a little bit about what we got to do out there. But this was my coworker, Bibulai. This was our chauffeur. And this is my girlfriend who came and visited for 2 months. So my methods to assess the monitoring and evaluation, the data collection and reporting done in Peace Corps Senegal was first to look at the data. So I call that a desk review. I was looking at their policies and procedures and then the actual data that was reported and trying to find themes in the errors. Next, I actually was fortunate to just right in the beginning of my internship to be in town when they had a large monitoring evaluation champion training. So that was, they were developing a new program where they have Peace Corps volunteers champion data collection and reporting and teach others how to do that. So that was a great time for me to develop questions and test some of my ideas about what was happening. Next, I spent 2 weeks doing interviews with Peace Corps volunteers in the field. So that was a really great experience. I got to travel to several different parts of the country, and we called them data quality assurance visits. So I would go in after having looked at their data, what they had reported, and then asked them, okay, so I saw that you reported, we'll take an example from health, I saw that you reported that 20 women are now exclusively breastfeeding after your training. How did you find that out? How do you know that they're actually exclusively breastfeeding in the first 6 months of their child's life? And often, this was one of the one of the common themes, they would say, oh, well, I trained them to do that, so now they're doing that. And we know that training is an output, and that outcome is the actual behavior change, and that's what we're interested in. But they had not gone and followed up with, after their training, to see who was actually implementing that new behavior. So yeah, site visits. I visited 2 regions, did 15 interviews, and did that over 2 weeks. This is a picture from, this is probably one of the greenest areas that I experienced in Senegal. Senegal is mostly in the Sahel desert, and this was driving through a desert. In a lot of these site visits, it was quite remarkable. We would drive from a town of 30,000, leave on a dirt road, drive 30 miles down the dirt road, and then just turn off the dirt road and start driving through the desert for 30 miles until we came to a village of 500 people that was just plopped there for some reason I can't really understand. But this would be a typical place where a village would be plopped down. So it's really quite beautiful. So my final product, I felt really fortunate to be able to come in and kind of act as an external consultant for Peace Corps Senegal. I came in with limited bias because I didn't know much about their monitoring and evaluation. I didn't have biases going into it about Peace Corps. So I was able to, from start to finish, complete this project for them and hand it over. My final report, I called the State of Peace Corps Senegal's Monitoring, Reporting, and Evaluation, an assessment of the bright spots and challenges 1 year after reform. So, like I said, about a year ago, they went through and changed all of their program framework and indicators, and now I was looking at it to see how that process was going. This picture is out in the field. This woman here in the hat is a Peace Corps volunteer. Here's a Bibulai and myself, and we are learning about her farming project. So my recommendations that came out of the assessment that I did address things from very small elements of training all the way up to massive organizational shifts. So organizational culture was one thing that I addressed. You need to change messaging. You need to recruit a different type of volunteer that's not interested as much in a cultural exchange, which is or more so on top of being interested in a cultural exchange, is interested in gaining professional development experience in the field of international development. So monitoring and evaluation is a core component of development work, and people need to know that coming into Peace Corps Senegal. Volunteer recruitment, I just mentioned that one. Volunteer training. A lot of my recommendations had to do with volunteer training. So I found specific activities or handouts that were really effective. Volunteers would say, oh, I remember that arrow diagram handout. That was really important to me. So then I would say, you guys really need to start training more on that arrow diagram. But then also just starting to train earlier, get training on the importance of monitoring and evaluation from day one. Data collection and reporting tools. We are asking volunteers to go out and collect data on specific indicators, but we weren't giving them the tools to do that. We weren't giving them surveys or we weren't helping them connect. We weren't giving them connectivity in their regional houses to report that. So there was a lot of things around data collection and reporting, and the tools, the software that was being used to do that, I made recommendations around. And then attitudes and perceptions among PCVs. This was probably my most contentious recommendation, but it was, I think, a good one. It was to basically to kind of be out with the old school Peace Corps volunteer and in with the new. So I found that many newer volunteers were coming in. They had started a Master's International program and coming in with this attitude that I had mentioned where, oh, I understand the importance of monitoring and evaluation. That was due to an already shifting culture in Peace Corps. And the older volunteers were saying, I'm out in the field, you always change the framework on me anyways, I don't care about data collection. So it was kind of change that culture, change perceptions among Peace Corps volunteers overall. This photo is another site from a village during a data quality assurance visit. This photo is in Dakar, where I lived, and this is in Gore, which is the community that I lived in, and also where my office was. So the outcomes of my work, I was fortunate to finish the report and present my results to the staff of Peace Corps and some third-year volunteers with about 3 weeks left in my internship. Well, first of all, just during my presentation, I handed over my report to my supervisor earlier that week, and during my report, she raised her hand and interrupted me, and she said, it was during the cultural shift and the messaging argument that I made, and she said, I just want to say that I just got off the phone with Washington, D.C. this morning, and we're already going forward with this. We need a meeting to start reworking our messaging, and so I was really fortunate to see some immediate outcomes of this report rather than see it go in a filing cabinet. So early introduction to project design and monitoring and evaluation. We changed recommended readings for Peace Corps volunteers coming in, and we started to change that messaging, as I mentioned. I saw increased training on monitoring and evaluation. My last week there, I actually got to do some training for Peace Corps volunteers on data collection methods, and then also I saw every single presentation throughout that 2-day workshop. Every single presenter mentioned the importance of it, and that was a new thing that was happening. And then finally, by the time I left, about 90% of indicators had data collection tools for them, and there was guides for how to design a project with the end in mind, and they were starting to build those resources to assist volunteers in doing their data collection. The potential impact, I say potential because I'm not sure if it's going to happen. I'm optimistic and hoping it will. But through improved monitoring and evaluation, I hope that Peace Corps Senegal will see higher quality programs, so higher quality health, community economic development, and agricultural programs. Through that, they will see, higher quality program evaluations. Through that, we will see increased organizational learning, and through that, we will see the improved programs. This photo is another coastal town. My last week I spent backpacking with this guy here who's a Peace Corps volunteer, and we backpacked down the coast, and so this was in one of our towns. I'm missing one slide here, but I wanted to just say career impact as well, and that is, it was really important for me to get experience in West Africa, in Francophone Africa. I have a lot of experience previously domestically and in Latin America, and so I wanted to build French language and also understand regional development issues in West Africa. And then I also wanted to be with a government agency. All of my work previously is with small community-based nonprofits. So I wanted to understand what it was like to work in a government agency, see if I can handle that bureaucracy and all. So I focused in on my career goals moving forward, and I'm really grateful for that experience as well. So thank you, Mrs. Crook. Thank you all for listening. Look forward to your questions after.
Hi everyone, my name is Robbie Paras. I'm a second-year GPS student here at the LBJ School. And this summer I interned at the Asia Foundation in Mongolia. So 2 reasons why I chose the Asia Foundation. One, I have a regional interest in Asia. I worked and lived and traveled all throughout Asia, though not Mongolia. And the reason why I wanted to go to Mongolia was because I have never been there, but also it's a very unique country with a different political context than all of the Asian countries I've been to. So I wanted to expand my experience there. And I've also worked with the Asia Foundation in the past, so I have a good relationship with them. So a little bit about the Asia Foundation. They work in 5 core main areas, and they've been around for 60 years and is a well-established organization. They are headquartered in San Francisco, California, with an office in Washington, D.C., as well as 18 countries across the Asia-Pacific region. And they work in these 5 areas: economic development, environment, governance and law, women's empowerment, and regional cooperation. So the Mongolia office was started in 1993 and was one of the first organizations that came to Mongolia after it became a democracy. So it has a really good reputation on the ground and with local Mongolians. Has about 40 employees, mostly local staff with a few expat staff as well. And it's located in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, the capital city. So actually going back, I like my colleagues here, my internship was, I did a lot, but I want to touch on the 3 main projects I worked on. They're still ongoing, so they're a little bit open-ended, but I just want to give you brief snapshots of the 3 main projects I worked on. So the first one is women's empowerment and entrepreneurship. And the main activity I worked on here is this Women in Business Forum that took place in mid-May. This actually happened on my first week when I arrived in Mongolia. And this was done in partnership with the National Committee on Gender Equality, which is a local government partner of the Asia Foundation. And what this forum was about was it took 60 women business leaders, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and academics, and it brought them together to discuss what are the main challenges and barriers to promoting gender equality in the labor force, as well as promoting entrepreneurship. So based on the outcomes of this forum, the Asia Foundation and the NCGE actually developed a series of follow-up trainings to go over some of the key topics that the participants felt like they wanted to learn more about. Things like better marketing strategies for the businesses, learning more about labor laws, employment, and taxation issues, just so that they can be better equipped to grow their businesses. So it was a very successful event. The second main project I worked on is economic development, and this is actually one of the newest projects at the Asia Foundation Mongolia. And because of my experience in the Asia Foundation and other country offices, this was the one that I felt most excited about. And the main activity that I worked on here is coordinating with the Economic Development Agency, which is a government agency which is also newly established. It's only been around for less than a year. And a little bit of context here is that Mongolia has seen huge economic gains in the past 4 or 5 years because of the mining sector. The capital city of Ulaanbaatar is seeing a lot of this economic growth. There's a lot of construction going on there. There's a lot of investment coming in. And at the same time, there's a rapid rise in urbanization. So how the city works with this influx of migrants coming into the city, making sure they have basic services, making sure there's enough jobs for everyone. These are just some of the key issues that need to be put on the agenda of the economic development plan. And so this strategic planning process provides a platform for that. And it's a transparent and participatory way to make sure that these issues are getting addressed. So this summer, I worked with the Economic Development Agency in identifying executive and subcommittee members for these committees, facilitating meetings, and making sure that this process is on track, and with the main goal of coming up with an economic strategy action plan to be submitted to the city of Ulaanbaatar next year. So it's a very ambitious plan, but it's still ongoing, and we got a lot of stuff done over the summer. And the third main project I worked on is a monitoring and evaluation of the Mongolian Women Farmers Association. This is a local nonprofit that works with low-income women and trains them in sustainable urban organic farming. And this is actually a very popular project with Asia Foundation donors. It's been supported for about 6 to 7 years now, but there hasn't really been a rigorous evaluation done to really find out what's working with this project and what's not, what are the key outcomes, and how can we improve this project. So I worked with a local research firm called Development Solutions to design an evaluation to measure the impacts of this project. And it is still going on right now. But what I really liked about this project is that I got to go out and meet the beneficiaries. I got to participate in some of the site visits and sit in on some key interviews translated because all of the beneficiaries speak Mongolian, which I don't. But it was really great way to offset some of the more sort of high-level things that I was involved with. This was very much hands-on. I got to go to the women farmers' farms and got to see what they are working on. So I just want to say Bayatla in Mongolian. Thank you so much to Mrs. Crook and the Strauss Center. And yeah, it was a really, really great experience, so thank you so much.